sitting on like right in the back of that room. What is it?
If anything, you can walk me right now. You already get to go. Okay, so show me where you're at.
You guys both serve or you both serve? How people reacting to the discourse so far?
Most of our people that are good for nothing more than when the civilians are the ones that have to pick up on what we do, and that's one of our screening factors. We don't just let anybody in. We have to mentally have a fortitude to be able to follow simple instructions without questioning. They don't want to say it. We can't do that. We don't care how far up you're these cameras in and out. Which one they only in the first. I'll see you in a second.
And then like with the young folks, like what's that thing like?
I gave that meeting this week to all of our current soldiers that we're going to start having young folks that are going to be coming in, and that it's our responsibility to be a role model for them and to identify the ones that need a little pulling along, and they have the potential.
Yeah, that's good shot. Yeah, I was funny that you said that because I was just thinking about, I was thinking about like my 20-year-old self, right? Things that we thought, how we thought.
Do I need to move the case?
We thought things were going to be. The fact that we're talking the same damn conversation. And then talking to my dad about it. My dad marched, he did all that, whatever, went to the house, same conversation. He's like, yeah, it's balls moved, but he's like, I'm still worried about you. Right. And it was weird because like, I don't care what you got, I'm still worried about you. And it's even worse than my mom, right? I'm the only.
We're just looking at the shot right now. Can I text you? You're not supposed to move here. Just touch. And then let me look at your shot.
It's just interesting to have this conversation. But I was funny. I'm actually proud of my mom. She went and got gun certified. She's 70.
I hear from people in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. They may call me, just email me, and have one of their family members. Grandson or grandchild. I've been waiting for this time. And I thought that I would go into the Lord without ever seeing us. So, next year, I'm not helping. 79 years old, still man. I find that there's an older demographic that welcomes this, wish they could be a part of it, kind of feel like they're not got a younger demographic that wants to be a part of it, but they haven't learned yet the magic of organization, the power of being in one accord, and they have not learned the effectiveness of having one voice, a spokesperson for a group, not a dictator, a communicator, orator, someone who can be interpreter, someone who can code shit, and actually come up with, let's summarize what we want. Not just what we need.
Can you just make sure you hug your camera?
They're like, oh, it's more to this than just walking around with guns?
Yeah. It's my favorite scene from Selma. There's a target in Selma. We all have the armor in the kitchen. And we say, what are we going to do? Okay.
When you were there before shooting, how big was the crowd? What did you see?
So the thing about it is, and I think this is what happened, the anticipation of the crowd tracks so big, people kept wanting to drive back.
You good?
They knew you guys were they just wanted to be over there.
Yeah.
And so some of them never made it back to the other side.
Mm.
The shooting made them not go from one side to the other. I
I'm
thought
good.
if I was
Stevie, you good?
well,
Yes, sir.
Let's do it, Paul.
I talked to them.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. 255? Are you rolling?
And that's what I actually saw.
Yeah,
The
we're rolling.
woman who came back to where we were, and she had a child, and she was screaming, and we were like, what is she screaming about? And I said, oh dear, they're keys, and she's very upset, and I can understand she had a child, and she left.
Hey, I mean, what else would you do? Especially if you become armed, you're gonna just.
Ronnie,
We are good to go. If everybody's phone on silence. So we don't mind clapping once we start rolling, for the sake of the.
Rob, you guys got me?
got you.
Not that we don't know who you guys are, but if you would, give me your first and last name.
My real name is John Fitzgerald Johnson. I'm known as Grandmaster Jet. Known as K. Foster.
Look, we're obviously here to talk about the organization that you and I lead. Can you tell us about the NFAC?
The NFAC is an all African American and other countries involved militia that was formed in response to the continued level of rising police brutality and racial aggressions against black folks, not just in the United States, but abroad. Here within the United States, it is a militia that has been formed to protect the black community, self-police the black community, and educate the black community on the responsibility of firearms and their constitutional rights in applicable situations involving fire. That's our overall. And that's who we are.
So I guess an easy question would be, are you guys against police? Or what, how is this going
We are not against anyone. As I said before, we're pro protecting the black community. And that can be against anyone of any color. We don't look at color. We look at the instances and the injustices that are done against us. We look at the actions, and if they come from a predominant group, such as the police, or such as any other group, that may single us out simply because of the color of our skin, our history, and then we're here to defend against that. So no, we're not just like police. As a matter of fact, we work along with municipal governments who will enter into the municipality because you cannot just invade a place like that. So we operate within the confines of the law. We always have operated within the confines of the law. That's why we have a zero incident record, no arrest, no property destruction, no shots been fired. Not at any one. We've had one accidental incident, but that happens everywhere. The end of the day is that we are a peaceful, law-abiding organization practicing our constitutional rights to bear arms, to peacefully assemble, to bring our grievances to the government in an organized fashion backed up by guns.
If you don't mind, there's always been a lot of talk for pro-Second Amendment, but you've obviously faced some different reactions based upon not only the size of the group, the skin tone of the group. Explain that in terms of some of the hurdles that you guys have faced so far.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm black. No more, no less. First, I'm a U.S. citizen. I am someone who was born in this country under the Constitution. I should be afforded all of those rights. Nobody says anything when other demographics pick up weapons besides arming themselves and confront the government. Or anything from wearing a mask to being cooped up in the house, but when certain demographics arm themselves, all of a sudden people tend to act like the Constitution does not apply, or that there's been some egregious violation of the Constitution, or most importantly, that we're celebrating the Constitution. We're not. We're simply exercising the same right that you do every day. The difference is, as soon as NFAC became visible, all of a sudden there were those who said, this can't be done. There must be something we can do about this. This is criminal. No, it's not criminal. It's constitutional. And if you believe that the Constitution applies to each and every American as you profess, if all of the words that we've seen, especially after the George Floyd incident, this global wave of everyone wanting to come together, if you truly stand behind those words, why do you have heartburn with the sight of 1,500, 3,500, 5,000 African Americans illegally armed exercising those same rights? Why is there this decision that there's going to be violence, that there are terrorists, as the president said, with thugs on a plane, or as Congressman Higgins said, that he would kill us and drop us where we stood? We receive this resistance simply because I can say on camera what most of the people are too scared to say. It's because we're black. And in your mind, these rights don't apply to us. In your mind, there's something wrong when you see black people with weapons, because people have been socialized to believe after 400 years, 250 years of slavery and all the others that the gun law that existed in this country prohibited blacks from owning guns. Now that we live in this most homogenized environment, they say the laws are there, but when they see these, all of a sudden everybody has a problem. Everybody thinks that there's something wrong. But this is simply a response to protect. This is simply a response to love. This is simply a response of unity. This is simply a response of what's built into the Constitution. We get more examination, more question, more laws that have never been enacted before by the municipality that can prohibit us from impeding our rights. I'll be candid here. When we're asked to do something that's never been asked of anyone else, and you can't even show us proof that you've ever done it before, then immediately, rather than responding in emotion and getting irrational, we do like everybody else. We consult case precedent. We look at Supreme Court decisions. We look at federal, state, and local laws and statutes. We bring that back and say, "Now, please explain to us, why again are you asking this? If you're not asking it just because we're black, then why are you asking this when you've never asked this of anyone else?" To the media, I'll say this. You say the white militia all the time, but you didn't start saying that until NFAC showed up on the scene and you had to tackle on black militias, not just militia. The history of militias in this country are deep, and they serve several purposes. The Republicans had a militia. The Democrats had a militia to push forward their political positions. The NFAC is a group that's here to push forward the political decisions, aspirations, and roadmap of the black community. No more, no less. But that does not make us just the black militia and just the white. It pits us against each other. When they have their own reason for existing, we have our own reason for existing. In answer to your question of our size, when we first popped out, we popped out completely boring. So where did all these people come from, organized and so forth? What they fail to realize is this. Militias are formed by people for different reasons. You got 5 folks over here who didn't like the quarantine. You got 10 folks over here who probably felt like their voting rights were being infringed. So they formed these militias. Many different reasons. Over 500 different white militias in this country for different reasons. Yet the NFAC has one particular goal, with one demographic that has one particular issue. So our numbers are going to be large because we all have the same issue. That's why we're so large.
And if you don't mind, what is that issue?
The issue is the continued treatment of black people in the United States as second-class citizens, whether it be at the hands of the police or at the hands of the judicial system. Breonna Taylor is a prime example. Whether it be at the hands of wealth distribution in this country. We could do an entire talk about what the average wealth of a black American family is today compared to where it was in 1865 through Jim Crow, Reconstruction, compared to the wealth of white families and middle class and the upper elite. The redistribution of wealth. There are many issues that impact the black community that in order for them to prepare themselves, heal themselves, and become a productive part of this overall civilization, we have to have some type of a bulwark around us to stop the attacks against us that prevent us from healing ourselves. NFAC is the Band-Aid while the wound is being healed underneath. Those things that continue to happen that aggress us as a people. Not as a person, but speaking as a people. There is a difference. There are personal injustices that happen every day in this country deals with in all types of ways. But racial injustice in this country is not dealt with in an even-hand manner. And it leaves open the door to be ambiguous as to exactly what you would call an attack. Everyone wants to talk about it. We got tired of talking about it. It's time to push back about it.
What is that pushback? What do you need to understand about it? Not only how you guys are organizing, but you talk about being able to provide people structure. What sort of, what could we see in the next few months from this group? What voice do you want to have in the community?
We don't want anything. We already have it. You know, I want to thank you first for having us to have this discussion, but the NFAC When we first came on the scene back in around Maud Arbery in Brunswick, the media ignored it. I'm going to be frank here. When we went to Stone Mountain, 1,500 strong, to address a threat that was made against all Black Americans in America, and to meet that threat in the home of the Ku Klux Klan, even though they were not there, the media ignored that. When we went into Louisville to demand transparency in the case of Breonna Taylor, so that it could get moving along, we could get to where we are today. The only thing the media focused on was an accidental discharge that happened before the march even happened. They talked about nothing that happened that day. They talked about the march. They didn't talk about the response by the Attorney General. So we've been pretty much ignored by mainstream media. So it's not a message and a voice. The public knows exactly who we are. Black America already hears our voice. As a matter of fact, the battle that rages right now is on social media and the censorship that they're waging across folks like myself and others who try to get the word out to these folks, and how they shut us down. Matter of fact, before every one of our formations, they shut us down because they know that whatever you all don't report from your organizations gets reported raw from the streets, and that has power in it too. Our message has been one of unity. Our message has been one of inspiration to the community, that you can organize yourselves, arm yourselves legally in such a fashion where you don't have to tear up the place. There's a difference between rioting and protesting. Protesting being organized with the message, signs, people demanding something. Once you start breaking windows and burning buildings, that's rioting. And what's happened today is there's been this confusion that you're calling rioters protesters. You're calling protesters rioters. It's all gotten mixed together. At some point, we have to get to a point where we realize that if there are going to be levels of escalation to this, what is the final escalation? The final escalation is organization. And the organization can then speak to the situation. And if there's a need for aggression, let it be an organized response. The U.S. military is nothing but a tool to put forth U.S. policy. They don't just go in and start shooting and burning up the place. There's a discussion. If the discussion breaks down, they bring the hammer down. That same methodology needs to happen within the United States. There need to be discussions that lead to a point that if there cannot be some form of reconciliation, some form of compromise, some form of addressing or redressing what the people are asking, then what history has always shown is nothing new with us. It's something that's happened time and time again. This country was built on guns. This country was built on revolution. This world was built on people revolting against when they can't get justice or the answer that they want. We're in a position to do that, but that is not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to get the answers and the results and the reforms that everybody else wants. And if anybody has any doubt that this may seem radical, then think about this. In the last 4 or 5 months since we've come on the scene, every city that we've set foot in, there's been traction on the case. There's been transparency that was not being given to the folks. There's been an exhibition of respect for law enforcement that you don't see when these other groups come out that want to protest and they get tear gas and they're hit across the head. That's never happened to us, and it's never happened to anyone who's protested in our presence, because they see an organized, well-structured, disciplined, heavily armed entity that is there to protect their interests, the same way they're to protect the interests of whatever government they represent. So I would say that our message of inspiration, organization, the fact that you don't have to resort to pure-out destruction and mindless violence to get your point across. This is the model. This is the blueprint that's built into the Constitution. That's the message.
Where do you plan to go? You've obviously gone to several different cities to demonstrate. When you see certain acts that you find egregious, when you show up in those cities to get your voice heard, to make sure people's voices are heard?
We are not Batman and Robin running around like the Ghostbusters putting out fires. That's not the purpose of the police. The NFAC is growing exponentially, establishing chapters in almost every major city to empower those chapters to handle local problems themselves. The same structure that the military and the police use. We birth chapters that also get involved in community programs. And those that are involved in, let's say, for the education of gun ownership, rights ownership, things of that nature. People who are ex-felons that cannot possess a weapon, helping them to get their rights restored so that they can become a legal gun owner, and most importantly, a trader. Making sure that those folks who never served in the military get a chance to get elbow to elbow with guys like us and learn the problems to handle their own weapon this type and how to organize yourself to protect yourself, not defend anyone, defend yourself, and knowing the ramifications legally to stay within. So we've already started that process. We are aligned with other organizations in other countries already, like Forever Families in the UK, the Brazilian Garden movement in the UK, the French African Resistance in France. We're all aligned because we all have the same mission, which is the unification of our people, which is the defense of our people, but at the same time the education of them to do things in an organized fashion to get results, not just destroy.
I think it's a good place to go with this in terms of question-wise. Obviously, black people are buying more guns now than ever before. We've seen the numbers go up. What do you want to tell people who are interested in buying guns? What do you want them to understand about their rights?
But the first thing I would tell them is before you start thinking about buying a firearm, ask yourself two questions. Number one, why do you need it? That's the first thing. And second, what are you going to do about learning to use it? Buying it is one process. Acquiring the weapon and learning to use it effectively is another. Staying within the confines of the law is the last piece. When I say within the confines of the law, if you ask the average person, if a person comes in your house, do you have the right shooter? Oh yeah, I'll kill him on the spot. You're going to jail. Well, why? It's my house. This is why we encourage you to take the gun class, take the concurrent concealed class, and learn about use of deadly force, even as a civilian. Learn the laws in your respective state. Every state is different. Some states are constitution states that you need nothing. Other states are so strict they can't have a weapon at all. Okay, so you've got to learn these things. So I would encourage you to learn your laws first. Know yourself. Listen, if you know for a fact you've never done anything wrong, never even jaywalked, you should have a problem purchasing a weapon. But on the other hand, you've had a colorful past. Let's look at that first before you attempt to grab one of these. Save yourself a lot of trouble. And if you're question your motives. If your motives are to protect your family or take up shooting as a sport, it doesn't change the path of ownership, the responsibility, and most importantly, knowing the difference between the responsibility of running your mouth, which is your right in this country, running your mouth with one of these in your hand. It's a big difference. There's a certain level of accountability that has to happen. There's a certain level of restraint and maturity that you have to have. If you don't have that, you shouldn't have a weapon. You shouldn't even consider getting one.
How has the NRA or any other group, have they reached out? Have they encouraged you guys? What's been the response from other groups?
The NRA has been silent since our appearance in the scene, but I can understand they're involved in getting sued for the money that disappeared. I can understand that, but we don't have an opinion on the NRA. They are a political lobbying machine for whoever is stuffing their pockets. And so, no, they have never reached out to us. They're all about gun ownership, and they support the Second Amendment, and I would encourage them to keep on doing what they're doing for their constituents. But the NRA has never reached out to the NFAC.
Lots of conversation in the country right now about all these other groups, the Proud Boys and other groups that sort of popped up. When people try to put you or the group next to one of those groups, what's your response to that?
There's no response. There's nothing to put us next to. They're a militia. They're entitled to exist all they want for whatever reason. We're a militia. We're entitled to exist all we want. The only thing I find interesting in the narrative, when you say people put us up, it's almost like Game of Thrones or Call of Duty. Choose your fantasy team. This is not a game. We're not against anyone. As I've said before, our mission is the protection of the black race. That's why we refuse our view, our attention is turned anywhere. Any group that wants to oppose us, and we have to wonder what is your reason for existing. Because calling yourself a militia just so you can fight the black militia doesn't make you a militia. It makes you a racist.
So that you made clear to me before, you're not against the other race. Can you go through that as we talk about it? Just why this group is formed?
The reason, this is glad you brought up a great question. The reason that the NFAC is 100% African American, black, LGBTQ fraternity. This is a team building exercise. Malcolm X said that before we can learn to love another race, we must first learn to love ourselves. So this is an exercise in forcing us to work with us, to build something, to protect us, to defend us, to educate us. If it works, we get all the credit. If it fails, we have no one to blame but ourselves. It doesn't mean that we need to do anyone else. It means that we have got to learn to love ourselves to get this job done. There's too much infighting. There's too much, what's the word? Too much posturing going on right now. There's too much talk about what the other person is doing. We're all infighting, but we're not united What we're doing in NFAC is pulling people from all walks of life, people from all demographics, people from all economic levels in our own community, all the military, ex-military. We're pushing them together and forcing them to walk in one accord. So it's a team-building exercise. We have nothing against any other race. We're not anti-Semitic. We don't hate white people, contrary to what people think. Just because you love yourself doesn't mean we hate you. And just because you can't join the club doesn't mean the club hates you. This is an exclusive club because it's an asylum for special people to get better. And right now we're getting better.
When you hear the president say he wants poll watchers, possibly armed, to go out on November 3rd and watch the polls, you obviously understand the dynamic and how black people have been discouraged to vote, almost since they got the right to vote. Where will you be on November 3rd?
You know, it's interesting you say that because U.S. law already covers incidents where intimidating voters is intolerable. If the federal government will not stand to post to enforce those laws, especially in areas where this is obvious, this is going on. No one wants to step on anyone's constitutional toes. Those folks, if they have a right to be out there, then they're out there. As long as they're not threatening anyone or trying to intimidate anyone, then that's not an issue. The NFAC will not stand by and have members of the black community intimidated or denied their constitutional rights because of the color of their skin by anyone.
What does that mean? What is the group? What message does the group want people to understand when it comes to this? What some feel is constant intimidation.
There is no message. There is simply a recognition of what has always existed in this country. This is nothing new. NFAC didn't bring all of this out. This has been bubbling to the surface ever since President Trump got into his administration and refused to denounce white supremacy. It has emboldened certain groups. This is since our president has sat there and given and said and tried to retract words that seem to empower these people. That has given a rise, uptick in activity. We have the message of something that's already been around for years. If these things didn't need to have a presence like us, then we would have to pass a law to make it happen. We would have to have a Voters' Rights Act if we didn't have these things to worry about. These things have been with us since the inception of slavery. And now here we are in 2020 having the same conversation about people coming down who have a problem with people simply expressing their desire to support something and vote. I think that the message should be that this is not 1965. This is 2020. And I would advise anyone who has slipped back in time to return to the present. Because on November the 3rd, it's the present that we have to deal with. And it's not going to be in any book that you've ever read.
History celebrates the non-black so far, but there's also this avenue where we've seen people gather in Lafayette and were cheering you on, saying they felt they needed you there. They welcomed your presence. We heard the words from the people as you walked by. When you see that reaction, and obviously members are going, what is everyone missing? Are people not realizing how much this group has already been welcomed by the community?
People are intimidated for lack of knowledge. People are ignorant to gun laws. People are uninformed about who we are. When they react, if you're intimidated by guns, that's not my problem. You don't know the law, that's not my problem or my group's problem. As I've said before, we operate within the confines of the law. We don't owe an explanation to anyone. And if you can't get over your feelings and deal with the facts, that's your problem. And you're free to have those problems. As long as you don't act on the ignorance. And I think what's happened is the community loves us. The community says we need to see an organized response that the police respects. So they're happy to see that. Those who have a problem with it, and I'm going to be honest here, tend to be the very people that we were created to oppose. Those people who would deny the black folks. Those people who think that there must be something wrong and we must do something about it. These people who say things to us like, this is not the America I know. What America do you know? Because this is a part of America. America was built on the right of people to assemble themselves and defend themselves. So what America do you know? Those people, we cannot help you. We can only say, go read, educate yourself, circle back to us. And when you find out exactly what the law says, then apply that to us, you'll find out we're your friends. We're not a threat to you. Don't go on what you see before you put something in your head that will clarify what you see. It is the ignorance that drives those comments. It drives those people who are blind. And there are these people who have felt that they've reached a point of hopelessness, who feel like no one's listening, that no one's prepared to strike back. Not striking back, prepared to strike back. Sometimes all your big brother has to do is show up, and the argument is settled without firing a shot. The United States does it all the time. Things don't go right overseas. We send over a couple of carrier groups, fly some planes around just to give them the idea. All of a sudden, everyone's at the table. The same message is being received by the black community and other communities that have things in line with us. But if you're intimidated, it's not ignorance. You're not breaking the law. So what's the problem?
And my last question. We haven't talked about numbers or size or how fast the group is growing. Would you like to address any of that and talk about maybe the size of the group so far?
We've grown in spurts. After I went down to the McMichael's house down and paid him a visit, family a visit after the murder of Maud Arbery, there was a slight uptick in our membership that pushed us into 5 figures. And then after Louisville, our numbers exploded exponentially. And then, of course, going back in for the Derby, which cost them $165 million and $13.5 million in lost revenue, which was actually our target. Our numbers grew again. I would say now, since I dropped the age limit from 21 to 18, this number I will reveal because I'm speaking strictly for young folks, 14,000 in 3 days. That's to give you any idea of how fast we're growing.
I know I said that was my last, but I'll ask this one. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see this organization in the next few years?
It's actually 3 to 5 years. We have a 3 to 5 year roadmap. The actual intention, and this is also something that was missed by the media when we first came on the scene, we stated it very clearly. The intention of the final goal of the NFAC is to become the backbone of a structure nationwide that will either assist with self-policing of the black community, again, the protection of those communities in conjunction with the law enforcement model comes into existence after this reform wave is over. But most importantly, this is very lofty and long term. This country initiated an effort some years ago, an agency called the American Relocation Commission, or RCS back in the day, to relocate African Americans who were freed from slavery to Liberia. Of course, those people were not acclimated to the biologicals, so they succumbed to the diseases. So you just can't send people over to these environments. One of the things that has come up over the years has been a desire amongst African Americans in this country to have our own country somewhere, if not here in the United States, somewhere where a couple of countries would be willing to give us some space to carve out for ourselves to begin the building, nation building, so that we would have a place to call home. Because even though we're all citizens of the United States, culturally we have no home. There is no country in the 50-some-odd countries in Africa that claims us. We are the descendants of a group of people who have technically lost their way home. So the desire is for us one day to liberate those people, and maybe those people who want to leave, to go establish this particular home to these people that stay here, become our diplomatic brothers. It is the goal of the NFAC to facilitate that exodus and become a defensive force against anyone who wants to stop it. From stopping those people who want to go and establish our homes. Everyone else has around the world, through legal means, through the world courts, through the United Nations, through the certain petitions and so forth, to get us into a legal position. Here's why. People talk about reparations all the time. They talk about restitution all the time. But if they go and study the models, those folks that are paying reparations, you'll find out you cannot pay reparations to a color. It's never happened. You cannot pay restitution to a color. You pay them to a country. So you have to establish that identity first before you can have the conversations for redress of reparations, restitutions, human rights violations, or anything of that nature. One of our goals is to assist in the process of the creation of that entity that can sit at the table and have the conversation with the United Nations and the United States. then we can have a conversation about what is owed to us after 246 years of enslaving us, and even now treating us like second-hand citizens, even in the judicial systems, in the financial sector, in our education, in our community, in gentrification, and things like that. Our 3 to 5 year roadmap is to see the elevation of the Black nation. Thank you.
I do have one question. Obviously, like, we know who you are. We were with you this weekend, right? What's behind the name? If you want to ask that.
Yeah, so we can get it on the camera. If you would explain the NFAC, what it means and what's behind it.
NFAC is the name given to the coalition. And that stands for the Not Effing Around Coalition. That is a reflection of our attitude, the entire group. We're not effing around anymore with the judicial system that shortchanges us. We're not effing around anymore with the acceptance of brutality and waiting on some grand jury to hand us a raw deal. We're not effing around anymore with the continued abuses within our community and the lack of respect for our men, women, and children. We're not effing around anymore with a system that continues to tell us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, but never gives us the bootstraps to start with. We're not effing around anymore with the continued denial of the systemic violence that has been enacted against us as a people since we were brought to this country and the indigenous ones that were already here. In other words, we're not effing around with the status quo anymore. We're going to change it one way or the other. Now, if you want to know where the name came from, can I share that? I'll tell you. There's a movie called The Town with Ben Affleck. And there's a scene where the hero cop goes into the bank, and these guys are superstar bank robbers. They never get caught. They thought of everything. There's a scene where a guy walks in and he looks at all the work, and as the cops are doing their investigation, he says, "There's no need to investigate." He says, "Why?" He goes through everything that they did. And the cops say, "Yeah, they did that. Yeah, they did that. Yeah, they did that." And he gets exasperated. He says, "Look here, guys. These guys are not amateurs. This is a not effing around. And if we don't hurry up and catch them, this not effing around is about to go both ways. So get me something on these guys." That is our attitude. And when all of this first started, while I was in quarantine by myself, afraid to meet the people that were the children I never knew, that were now stuck with me because we're stuck together, that was when the name solidified. Guys, I got a name for this. This is how we're going to go forward. And it went from the crew to the coalition because it spread so fast. That's where the name came from. That is what the attitude is toward the injustices that continue and the fact that we're determined to get something done. We're not playing around with it.
Thank you. You want me to clap to end it?
Is this actually around?
Oh, let's go. But we had him on the cam, so right.
Yeah.
That works. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Of course, it's interesting in terms of, are you guys, what's the plans for the next step? Like, where you just, like, you saw what happened in Denton, Texas, obviously. Would you pop up in Texas? How do you choose where to go and how that kind of works?
Two things. The first thing is the level of the offense. To give you an example. When the situation happened with Martin, and the story really started to come out, as the story began to really come out, we listened to it, and then we're kind of like, okay, they're investigating it, then more details began to come out, and then it began to resemble something that I hadn't seen in years. This was not some guy running through a neighborhood and thought he was stealing and got shot. No, it started to smell like something else. I'm not a young guy. I just drink a lot of water. And I started to see some things that brought us to the attention of the group that this is systemic. What's happening across the country. We need to put eyes on this. When we left that, of course, George Floyd happened. As George Floyd exploded, we started hearing about Breonna Taylor. And we heard about it, but it looked like things were moving with it. So what we look for are things that the perception is nothing happened. And the people are starting to say, they're just totally ignoring us. When we got done with the George Floyd situation, which we never had to show up for because it took its own course, and of course it got the response that it deserved, we went back and we noticed that Breonna Taylor's case was still sitting there and there was no movement, there was no traction. That gets our attention because then we look at what the people have done. The people have protested, they've marched, they've sang, they've They've burned buildings. They've done all of these things, and they're still out there, and the government is technically considering them a nuisance, and they're ignoring them. Well, now it's time for something a little more stringent to come in. So we reach out. Most folks think that we just show up and don't. We reach out and start a dialogue to let them know, listen, you got our attention. You know, we want some answers. We're willing to come to the table and sit with you, without all the hollering and the accusations, and tell us what's going on, and we'll go back and tell the people, hey, this is what we found out. Okay? It's either what you say it is or it's not, but we've gone in, totally unbiased, prepared to back up what we want, have those conversations. Kentucky's done it. Georgia's done it. Everyone's done it. Now we've gone down to Lafayette. Again, assurances from the mayor and so forth that, this is the beginning of a new era. We get that all the time. It's great. We choose them by the level of the offense and the visibility. It has to come to our attention. We don't run out of it. We're not scanning the world for everything. Certain things have to bubble up, and we're like, oh, let's check this out. And then in some cases, it can be a combination of things that just reaches ahead. 8 or 9 things happen, and then the people are ready to explode. So that's how we do it.
Oh, we're good if you guys want to stop recording. We're just.
Yeah, can we text them
Are we not going to talk about Higgins?
Well, we got you on that.
Did you?
Yeah, the protest.
I feel good then.
Okay. No, so like, the goal of this one is I wanted you to have the voice of what this actually is. So not what the internet says it is, not what we do. I was going to ask you some questions about how to feel, actually about the explanation of why you got it, and see if it works. That'll be there. We work with kind of like at the same time. So, but I think what we have for you here and there, clear direction. But what our position is going to be outside of what the streets is so much. So to me, you'll be able to make your own decision. That is the most powerful thing to do. Facts.
I think that this conversation here will shed some light in some corners that have not had any light whatsoever. People have raised questions multiple times. It's like everyone's talking about you. Why is the mainstream media talking about you? Which opens the door to conspiracy theories. Oh, they're working for these guys. Oh, it's a political thing. This, that, and the third. At the end of the day, as we continue to have these events, which will get bigger, our ultimate goal is a million gun 2A formation, a million legal guns in one place at one time. If that doesn't get some attention, then nothing will. At the end of the day, we're here to express the will of the people, not to fight anyone, and to show them to come together and express what the various things that we have, and we can organize. Right? Anyone listening, we have a list. What's the timeline? So what do you think? We got some commitments from the Americans and our friends, the relations. Pretty sure we're side of the road. If you need any talk again, I'd like to establish a relationship with you guys that I wish I had before to avoid all of this misperception of you.
So my thing is, I cover lots of these racial incidents from different perspectives. I'm also tasked with law enforcement as well. So I'm in the Chicago area. You're out here.
I can't get through what I think was ours.
I got about it from different way, and that's like there's no care, respect. But that's what needs to be. So we'll see now.
Yeah.
This case, so you guys made like what we saw on the
You
street.
just talk back to the little area.
Like you didn't get to beat me.
Right.
You were in the middle of it. So watch. Show reactions. You didn't see it.
I've had everything from people come up and say, you changed my life. I've had people come up and say, I'm so glad to see this. I've had people come up and say, I did this back in the day, but I gave up, that type of situation. And then there are the people who just got relief. They're just relieved. It's relief. Like I had one guy say, I've been intimidated by people from my life, but now you guys come along and I feel like I can stand up again. And that's so important to people's esteem. This is racial esteem. They feel proud. That's what they need to feel proud.
When you put out videos, like some people kind of handle traffic stops.
That's planned in the future. All of that's planned in the future. I think right now we're solidifying membership and solidifying missions. I'm quote unquote supposed to be doing a recruiting tour. Here soon, I'll go around to every city and sanction their chapters and so forth. So yeah, there's people still growing.
Well, I know like African American steel is obviously black membership.
I really didn't speak on that either.
Right. I mean, I was there for 3.5 months. So what happened when you actually went to show because that's how I would have done it. So there's all these questions, right? So we'll figure it out.
Like, what account are you on?
I'm not sure this is him.
One of the agreements that came out of Louisville is that going forward, every officer that's involved in shooting has to be blood and drug tested. They never did. So you're going to tell me that this guy could have been high? He was shot this guy. You guys never asked that question? No. Well, no, they are. Because that's one of the things that we wanted to look at. We looked at the training. Here, he got found out. How do you guys know he wasn't drinking? You know he was found out to why. You don't report these statistics. You don't keep them. And then you don't even test them. That's culture.
She's still shooting. Hey. So what, you guys are broadcast side? No, that's fine. Exactly.
What account are you watching? I was just curious.
Watch, they can shut that one down. They shut down every account we've had in the last 3 days. Yeah, the official NFAC was shut down right before the
I heard you.
They shut us off. My account was having 125,000 followers, got shut down right before the verdict came out on Breonna Taylor. So now is the presidential campaign profile of T8 pretty sure it's right.
So you're gonna have multiple accounts and cycle through information to the groups. You have a closed door group, and you also have an open door as well.
It's like a lot of folks will come to our website.
Yeah.
Black men, they see it, they can't get it. They're like, why can't I access it? Because that's the number.
Well, it makes sense.
Period. There's no inspection in there. Now, if you go to one of our social media pages, you can get the live streams, all that stuff. You got now realize the public censorship on social media. You got followers now, like the folks that flop. And you can pages, you're going to fall out of what's going on. Until we build our own platform, which we're in the process of doing right now. Eventually, we'll be completely out of it.
So you guys are getting some assistance on that. Infrastructure on that.
We didn't ask this question in the interview, but we are. One of the reasons we protect our identity is because a lot of us are IT based. A lot of us are corporate based. A lot of technicians. Every walk of life, you just think that. We know how to do it. We've got our own focus on the cloud architecture. We've all got our own AWS and GCP and Azure and whatever. We all speak Python great. We're not stupid.
Well, it speaks to the basic way you live and you have access to everything.
Another thing we want to clear up, we're not based out of Atlanta. That's what's needed for me. I don't live in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta. Atlanta was just the first place we showed our face because of Stone Mountain. Like border runs with Georgia. Georgia is just a hot spot. Okay. But then we went to Louisville.
Are you gonna? You don't plan to name a base though.
The Central Base?
Yeah.
We are student participants. We studied COINTELPRO. We studied Operation Black Messiah. We studied infiltration techniques. We studied the decentralization, destabilization of an organization and civilization. We studied the destruction of the black civilization by Spencer Lee. We got brainwashed by Tom Harrell. We studied. So in order to take us apart, you have to not have learned from those lessons. We've learned from all of them.
So your force will always be moving.
We're everywhere. We're everywhere. Sounds good. Now, do I get a contact?
Oh, absolutely. But you also have my direct cell phone number.
And then you call me too.
Oh, absolutely. And so that's never without me. Here's the thing, look, the officer showed up this weekend. I was interested in what was going on. There will be more flashpoints, I'm sure we'll have discussions about it. This will probably take a few days to do. This is going to be probably an internet-based way. Clearly, the number one story that's on right now is the whole business. So what we're trying to build is not just how it was actually realistic. We'll show some of the images that we're going to compare to that. And I will give you a heads up. As soon as I figure out when you're going to publish, call you. Tell me personally. The two of us are working on it. But there's also talking to my other patriots. And know about it. But we discuss that. I mean, you didn't, your security was high Saturday, so I was glad to cut through. Oh, was it?
Andrew.